Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Queen's Cross podcast. I am your host, Alex.
And I'm your co-host, Shiloh.
And we've got a wonderful episode for you today. It's a short topic, but we have a lot of Q&A questions. Here is our daily schedule for today, and this starts with news, and then we will get into the main topic, which is, should ocean liners return? And if so, how would the industry look if it did? And then we got our Q&A questions, and we end with our trivia game. So let's begin with our news segment. I have my notes right here. As you can see from this photo, we have the Promenade Cafe has a new sign right there on the promenade level of Queen Mary inside the main hall. And it says Promenade Lounge, Cafe, Ship Model Gallery, Coffee and Ice Cream. And basically that just announces what's on the starboard side of the promenade. And it says coffee and ice cream. So that does show that there will be a new coffee shop and an ice cream bar that will be located right outside of the Promenade Cafe. So that's something that's to come. If it's not already installed, I actually don't know. We also have some photos of the mast, the main mast on the Queen Mary being repainted. And the first photo is from Chris Balster, and it shows the mast being covered with there's rust abatement treatment going on, but they're also putting the primer on the mast. And then the photos to follow are from Joey B on Facebook, and they show the completed mast and boom cranes completely repainted and rust treated. The crow's nest, the lookout, that looks brand new.
Yes.
Which is just, I could swear they must have done some kind of steel work on the floor of that lookout nest, because I could swear that I looked up at it and there used to be rust with holes on the bottom of that steel. And you could look right up into the crow's nest from these little tiny holes. But in these pictures, you can see that there are no holes. It looks brand new. So I'm thinking they must have done some kind of patchwork or something to do that. Maybe they welded tiny little steel plates to it or something, or maybe it was just putty, like a type of steel putty that you put. Either way, it looks really great. And
I do know that they had people up there though in the crow's nest. So the interior is, from what I can see, painted as well. And yeah, it's because it was not only faded, it was or not only faded rather, it was also rusty, but it was also just in some parts the paint was completely gone in the interior especially, and it really didn't look anything close to what it could have. And then now it looks brand new, like you just said, like it rolled out of John Brown shipyard, and it's a brand new mast.
We even have a photo from Jason Clavier or Jason Claver. I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but Jason took this picture, and it shows one of the painters up there in the lookout nest, kind of looking down. And of course, they have their little ropes set up for hauling up buckets of paint and stuff like that. But I just think that's so cool. And it shows that the crow's nest must be safe enough to stand in. Right. Because literally by California law, by, Cal OSHA and, the federal OSHA standards alone, if it was unsafe to stand in there would be no painters standing in there. That's part of the reason why they haven't refurbished the bridge wings yet, is because they actually can't have anybody standing on that floor for one reason or another. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to fall through, but there is something about the safety of it that it needs to be repaired first before someone can physically stand on it like a painter. So it goes to show that the crow's nest is not so far gone that someone would just break through the floor and fall out, because there wouldn't be a painter standing there if that were true.
Even with safety procedures and such, I still think if it wasn't safe enough, they still wouldn't let him up there. So yeah, I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
So it's good to see the ship being taken so well care of. That mast, even the last time they did repainting on the ship, the whole ship repaint in 2018, 2019, they didn't paint the mast. They did everything but the mast.
Yeah, and it was that kind of dull, almost a gray color in some spots.
We also have a screenshot here of the Queen Mary. Well, this is actually the manager, Steve Koloka, but he's accepting an award from... It's an award of excellence from the Historical Hotels of America for the Queen Mary. So congratulations to everyone at the Queen Mary, the whole crew, all the employees, the managers, for receiving this amazing award from the Historical Hotels of America. The ship really deserves it. So
certainly. If there's really any hotel in Southern California, or just in California in general, that hasn't got that award yet, it was certainly the Queen Mary that deserved it.
And then for the final part of our news segment, in the last podcast, we summarized all of the repairs and announcements that have happened over the course of summer, because we didn't do a podcast for quite a while. Mm-hmm. A lot of information and things kind of built up over time. So we did this big repair update on our last podcast episode. But one thing that a few people were asking about is the submarine. Why haven't they announced the submarine is going to be removed or anything? Well, the reason why we didn't mention it is because they actually did announce it, and I mentioned it in my last annual Queen Mary repair update, which was back in January of this year. Basically, the city of Long Beach, for the last couple of years, ever since they took over the Queen Mary in 2021, they've been looking to find the original owners of the submarine and to find even any of the other owners over the course of the last couple of decades to see if any one of them would take responsibility for removing the submarine. The submarine was deemed by a marine engineering firm. The Elliott Bay Design Group had looked at it, as well as another marine engineering firm also looked at it. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but they were hired. Those two independent marine engineering firms were hired by the city of Long Beach over the last couple of years, and they deemed that the submarine is not salvageable. It's so badly corroded and damaged, and it is leaking on the inside. The leak has been stopped for now to prevent the thing from sinking, but its inner and outer hulls are not watertight anymore, basically. And it would be a huge pain to try to move it, or even try to lift it out of the water, or even try to dismantle it where it floats. Either way, it's a huge risk, because the thing can and will fall apart when that happens. It is that badly corroded, and that's not even my words, that's from the inspections done. But anyway, the city of Long Beach finally, earlier this year, was able to say, look, we did everything we could to find previous owners and get them to pay for the removal of the submarine, which poses a slight risk to the Queen Mary if the submarine sinks. And they couldn't find them. So the city of Long Beach is now moving forward with plans to remove the submarine, and they said in January, I believe, that it would take anywhere between 12 to 24 months for the submarine to actually be removed from that point. And that was January of this year. So we can expect that around late 2026/early 2027, the submarine will be removed, because the city of Long Beach is adamant about getting rid of it. They're not going to forget about it. The reason is because right now they're putting all this investment in the Queen Mary, and they know that the submarine poses a slight risk to damaging the ship or worse. And so therefore the submarine has to go, as well as the fact that the 2028 Olympics are coming. They're trying to get the ship beautified and looking well and pretty for the Olympics, they can't have this big rusting submarine out front of the Queen Mary. It would just tarnish everything that they're doing. So the submarine is going. It's just a matter of when. And so I think we can expect that around late 2026, early 2027. Just a quick update from Alex of the future. As I was editing this podcast, the Queen Mary unveiled the new window displays outside the art gallery in the main hall. The pictures you see here were taken by Jonathan Quayle. The windows now feature various styles of Art Deco clocks that once graced the decorated bulkheads of the ship. The art gallery itself is inside the former Starboard gift shop, which is currently being reconverted to its original appearance as the drawing room from 1936. When it opens, many pieces of fine art from around the ship will be on display. All right. We are on our main topic, which is, will ocean liners return? Should they? And what would the industry look like if they did? Now, I did a video about this a couple years back, basically mentioning that I personally believe that there might be a slight, teeny tiny return of the of the ocean liner industry. I'm thinking of submarines now. And the reason why is because when you look at the last operating ocean liner out there today, which is the Queen Mary 2, often the ship books up its rooms a year in advance. I mean, even I'm looking at taking a voyage aboard the Queen Mary next year, and already I'm like, I have to book this thing soon or else it's going to book entirely up. Yeah. And that tells you that if you have to book things a year in advance, it's popular. People want more of it. And so that's why...
Well, not only that, but it's making a profit for them because they wouldn't continue that service.
Right. So that's why I believe that there would be a slight, teeny tiny return of ocean liners. Maybe, and I've said this many times, so I hope people won't misunderstand me, but I think it's possible that 10 years from now, or even 8 years from now, because I think that video is 2 years old now, maybe 8 years from now, we might see maybe a handful of ocean liners in service. There was kind of rumors swirling around about the Holland America line possibly building an ocean liner to do certain things that its cruise ships can't do, such as like very specific world tours, particularly through areas of rough weather. I mean, doing a world tour for a cruise ship takes a lot of advanced planning because you also have to plan for the seasonal weather that the cruise ships, can't do as well as an ocean liner can do. So that's the basic, what I believe is that maybe 10 years from now, a handful of ocean liners will be sailing the world, or at least just the Atlantic. But what do you think?
So I think certainly that that they will. I think they will come back in some capacity, even if it's just one other ocean liner built other than the Queen Mary 2. But seeing as the cruise line industry is still popular, it's not going anywhere. People still have an interest to travel by sea, and I certainly don't think it'll replace the airline industry in any capacity. I don't think ever again. Because it's just much more efficient, and it's just people find it better. That's why it took off in the 50s and 60s to begin with. But I think that the ocean liners that might come, they will be. I think they will be popular in the same capacity that Queen Mary 2 is, and especially if a line like Holland America, if they created some kind of ocean liner like that. They were very successful back in the 40s and 50s, and if they brought back their staple their staple what they would have been in the 50s or 60s, I think that it will be increasingly popular for them, and that might encourage other lines to do the same thing. But I do think that the interest of ocean travel between Europe and America or other major continents, of strictly just purely travel instead of leisurely vacationing, I think that there is still a crowd for that. It's just that they can't find it. because only one exists, and that's the Queen Mary 2. And like you said, it's always booked up, and it's kind of hard to get a hold of. If you're planning a trip last minute or close to like a year out, it might be hard to do that and still want to go on the Queen Mary 2, because you have to plan well in advance for everything to work out. So if there's a line that's kind of more accessible, I think that it'll be very popular in the sense that it will be profitable enough for them to continue that service.
Yeah, and I think going hand in hand with this conversation, people often ask, will the Queen Mary 2 be replaced with another ocean liner the way that QE2 was? And I would say yes, honestly. I think that they might, maybe not something as big as Queen Mary 2.
Right.
But I think they would, because Queen Mary 2 was a huge investment, and it costs a lot of money to run her because she's such a huge ship. But I could see them, in this economy, building a second one that is smaller. But who knows, maybe when the time comes to replace Queen Mary 2, the economy will be better and they'll invest in another giant ship. But what do you think? Will they replace it with another ocean liner?
So going along the lines of what I was saying, that it's obviously profitable enough that they've continued to do it for these many years, I think that that's evidence enough for them and other lines too that this is sustainable. It's not something that, because again, in the 50s and 60s, when jetliners are coming along, the whole reason that Queen Mary had to be sold is because they started losing a profit. And that's why they had to get rid of these ocean liners. And even Cunard was toying around with the idea of air travel back in the 50s and 60s, but they stuck with ships. And I think essentially that now that there are cruise ships, a lot of cruise lines that are profitable, and also Queen Mary 2 being profitable, I think that's proof enough that there's still a crowd for it, and it will still be sustainable on its own, and it won't be a money pit.
Yep. I agree. And I think with that video that I posted, there were a lot of people that kind of responded in the comments. I don't think they fully understood what I was trying to say in the video, because they were saying oh, well, ocean liners could never compete with cruise ships. And not cruise ships.
Oh, air travel. Yeah.
Air travel. Yeah. They're like, ocean liners could never compete with air travel. And I don't think that's what me or Shiloh is saying. We're not saying that, ocean liners will come back and compete with air travel. It would be specifically for people who have a lot of time and money on their hands.
Yep.
And which there is a market for that, and that market is growing. So,
and also too, people that want to experience that at least once in their life, because if there were no Queen Mary 2, you wouldn't be able to experience that really, unless it's the one-off cruise lines that do sometimes go to the United States to Europe, but that's not often. You're not going to have regular travel or a dependable travel in that fashion as you would with the Queen Mary 2. But if there were no ship like that, then nobody would be able to experience that. And I think there's people that want to. I know people personally that have never done it. You're one of them that want to do it at least once in their life, because you can't get that anywhere else.
What's interesting is I'm not even into cruise ships. A lot of people who I've told that, I'm going to do this trip, they think I'm doing it because it's like a cruise, but they're like, oh, but wouldn't you want to take a more exciting cruise? Something that, that there's lots of entertainment and stuff like that, like modern cruise ships. And I tell them, I'm like, no, for some reason, none of that appeals to me. I don't really know why, but what does appeal to me is being on an ocean liner, sitting in the library and reading a book as the ocean passes by the porthole, or having, afternoon tea along with a bunch of other passengers, or, getting dressed up for dinner, that kind of thing. Like, that's what really appeals to me. It's not the games, it's not the entertainment.
I really do think it was very evident back in the 50s and in the 40s and 30s and all the way up to the 60s. But I still think it's true today that the atmosphere is different than on a cruise ship than compared to something like Queen Mary 2 or any Cunard liner. The atmosphere is different. It's a different community, I guess, if you will.
Yes. And so the Queen Mary 2 she has had a reputation for having a much older clientele. Usually it's older folks and stuff like that. But there are a lot more younger people getting into sailing aboard the Queen Mary 2. And that's because of us millennials. We're all getting to the age now where we have a little bit of money saved up. We're able to travel. And so when we go aboard a ship like the Queen Mary 2, suddenly it you can see that there's a younger clientele coming in. And that's really been happening for ocean liners for the last 5 decades, ever since Queen Mary retired, and QE2 took up the mantle. There's been a sort of changing of the generations where you have the older folks who are still riding these ships, and then you get a brief period where younger people come in, but then those younger people become the older folks.
Even if you look at footage of the last great cruise from Queen Mary, it's predominantly older people. I mean, there are younger people there too, but even in '67, when on Queen Mary, an actual ocean liner, even on her last great cruise, it was mostly that too.
Yes. I mean, and when you really think about it, it also makes sense because, who would have had, $9,000 to spend?
That's very true. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, because again, it gives people the idea that these ships have a reputation for having older passengers because they only appeal to older people. But I don't think that's it at all. The Queen Mary 2 is an expensive ship.
Yeah.
And what she offers isn't necessarily for people who have a lot of money. So I think you'll only see the younger people when those younger people are the ones that have time and money on their hands.
Right. I was going to mention too that it takes more work to book a trip on the Queen Mary 2 because, like you've mentioned, that you have to wait out in advance to get a book a crossing that'll work. Because if you do it with other cruise lines, I mean, you can find readily available times and such. But with Cunard liners, I think it's a little bit harder.
Yeah. I wish that they had a second ocean liner right now because, when I was looking for the UK trip that I want to do, I needed to be able to take the Queen Mary to the UK.
Yeah.
Have around about 2 to 3 weeks of time in Europe and then be able to take the ship back. And the ship no longer does its weekly crossings. Now they do a lot more of it does a crossing, then a cruise, and then a crossing, and then a cruise. And so because of that, it kind of skews the schedule up a bit, and it's hard to find the right schedule for getting back on the ship to go home.
Right.
But we found it. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, so I think just to summarize what I've been saying, I don't think ocean liners will come back to compete with air travel at all. It's going to be for the limited few people who have the time and money on their hands to experience an ocean liner. And there is enough people who want to do that to garner at least, up to a handful of ships in the next 10 years being built. Alrighty. So, we'll move on to our Q&A. Okay, so we have our first question from Mike Mancini 313. They ask, is Queen Mary's forward gear room ever going to open? And what Mike is referring to is there is the windlass room. That's what it's called, a windlass room. And that is right below the forecastle deck of the Queen Mary. So that's the bow of the ship where all the machinery is. And all the mechanisms that run that machinery is in the deck below. And that room has basically been left untouched since the Queen Mary retired. That's one of those spaces that in the original plans, they were going to turn it into a walk-through kind of area,
Mhm.
but then they quickly abandoned it because the budget for the ship being converted to a hotel was ballooning like 8 times more than they expected it to be. That room is basically, I wouldn't say forgotten, but it's been left unused for the most part except for storage.
Mhm.
And then a few years back, like before the pandemic for sure, the folks at the Queen Mary and the management then at the time had announced that they discovered this abandoned room on the Queen Mary, which really was just a gimmick, because they knew it was there. And they brought the newspapers in to come and see this room, and yeah, that room is there. And so they announced at that time, which I think was 2017, that they were going to make it into a walkthrough exhibit, so that way people on the Steam and Steel tour, for instance, could walk through there.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really good idea. They still want to turn it into a walkthrough exhibit, but it does have a few hurdles to overcome. Mainly is that you have to create space for a walkthrough, like a catwalk for people. And the current catwalks that go through that room that were originally designed for the engineering crew of the ship, those don't cut it anymore. You need something that is at least 3 feet wide in order to get between all those machines. And it must be raised from the floor. And if it's raised from the floor, it must be wheelchair accessible, so ADA compliant. You know, all this kind of stuff. And that's difficult to do without cutting up all those machines and moving them, you know, because there is a limited space.
Even if you go down to the steering gear room and they have those original catwalks, those are pretty narrow, but those are original. Most of them are original in there. And if you were to cut those up, I mean, it'd be unrecognizable.
Yep. The steering gear room actually was pretty lucky that that catwalk that goes through it was so wide, because it's still there's a part of it that isn't ADA compliant. Like there's this one little part that you squeeze between, but other than that, the walkway is wide enough for most modern, you know, things. But
but even then, looking at the I can't even speak, the dynamics of it, it would be difficult, especially in the forward gear room, because those are really narrow.
There are quite a few, what do you call them, capstans that are driven by massive electric motors.
Yeah.
And the electric motors are in the center of the room, and they've got these engageable axles that spread out to the different capstans, so they can use the same motors to operate one capstan at a time. And those axles would probably have to be cut through to make room for this walkway. So
I would assume so. Yeah.
So that's kind of the main issue here, and I'm sure there's a way to get the job done. It's just not going to be cheap.
It might even be something as simple as like having the door open and then you can walk a few feet in, kind of like the travel bureau. Yeah. Have some plexiglass barriers or something of that sort, or maybe just have a waist tight barrier around it.
Yeah, and just in case for anybody watching who's like, oh, but can't they just grandfather all that in and, not do the ADA compliant thing? No. If you start letting people into an area that was previously inaccessible, that becomes a new attraction. And because it's new, you have to comply with ADA compliance. It's the law. It's the law in the United States. And so it has to be done. I think it's hailing outside. Yeah, so let's move on to the next question. So, at DM Productions asks, are there any plans to put lifeboats back on the ship? And the short answer is yes. So they did speak about this. I think by now it's been a year that they talked about it, but they do want to put lifeboats back on the ship. However, the thing that stands in the way is a lot of work. I think about $12 million worth of work. So basically, the lifeboats, they sit on davits. Those davits are built into the structure of the ship. They're not like the QE2, where they were able to cut the davits off and the ship is fine. If you cut the davits off of Queen Mary, it actually messes with the structure of the sun deck and the promenade deck,
Yeah.
because the davits are part of the structural support of those
And-
two levels of the ship.
And you can see that too if you go to promenade deck and you go to in between where the side lights are, and you can see groupings of beams that come down. And those are all the beams from the davits.
Yes, and if you look underneath, this is again on promenade deck, they have a scupper there for any kind of water runoff that that somehow might get into the promenade deck. And right where the base of the davit meets the scupper, it's been completely corroded away on most of those davits, which is the reason why they had to remove the lifeboats in the first place, is because since those davits are basically hardly or not even touching the promenade deck, all that weight was transferred onto the promenade side shell with all the windows, and the windows were cracking and breaking. Those are high strength windows designed to withstand about 2,000 pounds per square inch of water pressure. And they were cracking and breaking from the pressure of holding up the lifeboats and holding up the sun deck. So they had to remove the lifeboats to help alleviate some of that weight in order to reopen the ship. And this is all fixable. It's repairable. You can repair the side shell and get it waterproof again. You can repair the davit bases and weld new steel onto it to support the davits and all that. But it's not going to be cheap. It's going to cost at least $12 million. And so that's one of those things that they don't have the budget for it. The budget that they do get, which is very small, I mean, I think at most they've gotten maybe a chunk of $12 million at a time, but that has to be divided up into other things the hotel needs. And so the lifeboats, they are something they want to bring back, but it's not possible. Now, there's also another little rumor here I want to address real quick, because everybody saw that they removed lifeboats and started demolishing them. Yes, there are 2 lifeboats still on the ship. Lifeboats number 1 and number 3 are still on the ship, and then lifeboat number, I want to say 11 or 14, either 11 or 14, I can't remember which one, is sitting on the dock, and you can walk around the one on the dock. So that's 3 on the ship. There are 8 more lifeboats that were saved, and they are sitting in a open lot, a city lot that Long Beach owns just up the road from the Queen Mary. So there are a total of 11 lifeboats that are either original to Queen Mary or original to another Cunard ship like Queen Elizabeth.
I think some from Franconia and Ivernia probably, or even Media.
Yeah. So those are original Cunard lifeboats.
That I wasn't mentioning that too, is that a lot of people say that those are reproductions, and they're not. They might not all be from the Queen Mary, but they're all original Cunard lifeboats from one liner or another. And another thing too, I think it's important to mention, is that the lifeboats that eventually, when they do get the budget for again, that they do put back on the ship, they will be fiberglass.
So they will be replaced someday. It's just it's a matter of time. I'm not gonna lie, we may not see it happen even before the Olympics. All right, we got a Q&A question from John Hill 87D. They ask, what happened to the glass art panels that were removed from the second class staircase on R, C, and D decks? So what John's referring to is when the Queen Mary was converted into a hotel, they were turning the aft area of R deck into a hotel employee area, and then C and D decks below that were removed to make way for the lobby and all that for the exhibition hall. So the exhibition hall, and then also the museum of the ship as well. So those glass panels that were along the second class staircase that are specifically from those decks were removed and actually saved. They were placed in the Queen Mary archives, and they're still there today. They're in the Queen Mary archives. So they're actually safe, and you can still see the rest of the ones that are from B deck and up. So you can go from B deck to A deck, and I think the second class staircase even goes up to promenade deck. So
yeah, it does.
Yeah, so you can still see those glass panels, and but the rest of them, they are in storage, so they're safe.
I've heard rumor, which I'm not exactly sure is true or not, but in the swimming pool, the original mural of the swan, since it was cracked or destroyed, that the current one that you see of that I think it's a Roman vessel that they have,
I think
that
so.
blue panel. I've heard that's from the stairwell.
Right now, if that is a Sigmund Pulitzer art panel from the second class staircase, and that would probably be the only one that's been damaged
Right.
in order to fit it into the swimming pool room.
And even
but-
still, it exists if that is one of them.
Yeah. All right. So another Q&A question from, I'm going to totally mess up this name, but Dieter Kutz 9756. They ask, does the vinyl that covers the walls of the main hall conceal the old wood paneling from 1936? So first and foremost, it's not vinyl that's on the walls. It is pigskin hide, like the same thing that footballs are made out of. American footballs are made out of pigskin. So yeah, they're pigskin hide, but do they cover the old wood paneling from 1936? So this has been an ongoing debate for decades. Are the original panels still underneath? Now, I will preface this by saying that there was a picture posted by, I think it's called the RMS Queen Mary group on Facebook. They're not the actual hotel, they're just a Facebook group called RMS Queen Mary. But they did post a picture a while back showing one of the pigskin panels peeling up, and and in the picture the person had lifted up the corner, and behind it you could see some kind of wood panel. And in that picture they claimed that that is one of the original wood panels. However, let me just say that when you examine the wood grain of that panel from that picture, it does not match the chestnut oak panels that were in that room originally.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, because there are going to be people that said that say, oh, I've seen the backside of those panels and there is wood. Here's what I think. I think when they installed the pigskin panels, they did remove the original 1936 wood paneling, but they put up plywood over the steel in order to glue
you need some kind of mounting board, right? You can't,
Yeah, you need a mounting board. Yeah, the pigskin hide has to go on something hard. That's what makes it a wall instead of a tent.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's what that was. I think that the original wood paneling is not there anymore. And here's another reason why. If you look at all the ventilation grills that are at level with people, like next to the elevators, for instance, there's a big grill that's right up against the wall, and it's slatted and stuff. And that grill is flush with the pigskin panels, right? But in 1936, the grill was flush with the wood panels. So if the wood panels are still underneath, why isn't the pigskin panels over the extension of the grill, the ventilation grill? You know, it wouldn't be flush. It would be over it because they're on top. So yeah, so that's my two pieces of proof that the original 1936 wood panels are not beneath the pigskin hide, is because, for one thing, the pictures of the wood behind the pigskin hide do not match the wood grain of the chestnut oak that used to be there. And secondly, all of the vents and everything around the room are still flush with the walls as they were in 1936, which would not be the case if there was layers of things added on top of it. So
I've seen other photos too, and I've actually seen a section in person, and I've actually looked at it and touched it myself. And what I've seen, it looked like plywood, and I've heard people say that it looks different now because of the amount of glue that they applied. And I mean, maybe through the layer of glue, it may have changed the color or the appearance a little bit. But I've seen, like I said, I've seen that section in person, and I saw the other photo, and it did look lighter than the chestnut.
And for anybody wondering why they replaced the wood panels in the first place, was it because the Was it because the original chestnut panels were so damaged by the war? No. But anyway, as for why they removed it in the first place, just to lighten the room up and to dampen the sound echoing from around the room.
And those are the two most common reasons I've ever heard, is that the echo, the acoustics was pretty strong in that room. And it's just the general taste. It kind of, even though I do really like the original wood paneling in the main hall, I do agree that it really does make the space more lighthearted with the pigskin.
It does, because that room, you walk into the main hall today and it's pretty dark in there.
Yes.
Even as it is right now.
Even with both the doors open, with light, with natural light coming in, and you have overhead light, it's still pretty. Yeah, it can get dark in there.
It's dark, and if you can imagine that room, then with the dark corduroyed floors and the dark wood paneling all over the room, that room would have been really, really dark. And so I think that's the main thing, that they were like, we need to lighten this room up, and here's a cheap and fast way we can do it, and it's pigskin hide, so it's not, it adds a bit of class to it. All right, we have our final Q&A question from LA Sous Vide Boy, and they ask, were the drawing room and veranda grill the only two public spaces with white walls? And no. There were a lot of spaces on the ship that had white walls. I mean, even nearby to the drawing room was the lecture room, which had white walls. I believe behind the curtains of the music room would have been white walls. Originally,
they had in the original deck plans, they had, because you know how they switched places of the nursery and the music room. They did that both in the original plans, and then they did it post-war. So they did it twice. But in the original design, there was I can't remember if they actually put it in the final design, but in the original, pre-construction design, they had a listening booth into the music room. And from what I could see of all the preliminary sketches, they were intended to have white walls too. I think the original 1936 Travel Bureau of first class, they had white walls in there too.
Yeah, I'm remembering the pictures now, the pre-war Travel Bureau. It didn't look at all impressive, and I think it was white walls. But
yeah.
Oh, and the various beauty salons and barber shops around the ship. So there were a few places on the ship that didn't have wood paneling. It wasn't the whole ship, but that being said, the Queen Mary does have a whole lot of wood paneling.
Yes, predominantly, yeah.
All right, so that does it for the Q&A, and finally we just move on to the trivia game that we do. And so usually I'll ask Shiloh 2 questions, he'll ask me 2 questions, and then we have 1 question left for the audience. And I've written my questions down on my phone, so I'll have to read from there. But Shiloh, your first question from me is, what was the name and purpose of the metal strip along the hull during World War II?
That one I do know. That's the degaussing strip. And the purpose of that was usually degaussing strips are to reduce magnetic fields, like in ammo crates or in armories where they have, shells that are explosive. But the purpose on the Queen Mary was to deter the magnetism of the torpedoes, and also radio waves. It would help to deflect any kind of magnetism that would alert the enemy that a ship is nearby, or even because some of the torpedoes were driven by radio or magnetic fields. So by deterring it, it would kind of decrease the likelihood of the torpedo actually striking the ship. And you can actually still see the welding path of that degaussing strip today on the ship.
And the degaussing strip also, it prevented underwater mines from exploding.
That too, yep.
Or I should say, supposedly, because there was a time when the Queen Mary was not 300 feet away from an underwater mine that exploded.
Yep.
And so it brought into question whether or not the degaussing strip ever worked, and the Queen Mary was just lucky throughout the war.
Yes. What is the company that predominantly produce, not only just on the Queen Mary, but most ocean liners, that produce the locks for a lot of the things on the ship, for doors and other such things that require locks.
Oh, no.
It's a famous company, not as famous as today, but they're still around.
Yeah, I used to know the name. Oh, shoot. Because you know what? I literally, not a couple weeks ago, I did an article on RMS QM Wiki, our free encyclopedia website. Let me plug that in.
Yeah.
Everything about the Queen Mary on RMS QM Wiki. It's really cool. Lots of detail if you love detail and you love pictures of the ship. And I did an article, and it had the name of the people who did the locks, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Majority of them were Yale.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
My next question for you is, the balustrades in the observation bar are made of what metal?
It is a nickel alloy.
Okay, do you know the proprietary name for it?
I can't remember right now, but I do know that there's nickel in there, and it's not a solid mixture. It's a mixture of a few metals.
Well, you are right about that, but the name is Burmabrite.
Burmabrite.
Yep, Burmabrite is the proprietary name of that specific metal. And your second question for me?
True or false, on Queen Mary's last great cruise, when the plane, I think it was a DC-7 that passed over the ship and it dropped flowers, true or false, was the original pilot of the plane in 1936 that flew over Queen Mary when she arrived in New York, was that same pilot, and they also dropped flowers in the ship, was that same pilot from 1936 also in the cockpit of the plane in 67?
Ooh. So, I feel like because you're asking this question, and it's very specific, the answer would have to be yes, it's the same pilot. But I'm going to go against my gut feeling and say no, it wasn't the same pilot.
So, in a way, I guess you're correct, because he actually wasn't flying the plane, but he was there. He was in the cockpit. He just wasn't operating the plane. But he was there.
Darn it. I can't get a break today.
No.
See, folks, I guess it goes to show that I'm not an expert. I don't know everything about the ship. But we do on RMS QM Wiki. Everything listed there is cited with sources, so that way you know that the information is accurate because we have proof of where we got it from. So I guess that way we can pass the buck and blame somebody else if something's incorrect.
Right. Just put it on them,
yeah. All right, and we have one last question for the audience. How many transatlantic crossings did the Queen Mary complete in peacetime? How many transatlantic crossings did Queen Mary complete in peacetime? And folks, the answer to that question will be answered a couple hours after this video is posted to YouTube. I will put it in a pinned comment at the top of the comment section. And yeah, so that does it for this episode today. I want to thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Shiloh, once again for coming onto the show and being our co-host.
Of course, always.
Yeah, we have Queen Mary themed merchandise and all sorts of stuff on our merch page, which is linked in the description below. And we have some stuff for the upcoming Veterans Day. So anyway, folks, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.